ship. At least the other documentary had mermaids. Why the hell would I need to learn again how much they stiffed Mary Curie?
Ray, don't start this shit up again. That channel's for the uninformed. Not all of us get a fancy college degree in history.
You'd have one too if you were only obsessed with Ismay. The Titanic history isn't even that interesting. The ship was built, the ship sank. What more is there to it?
The stories we tell, they live longer than we do. The tragedy of the Titanic does not lie with the ship, it lies with the deaths. The same can be said for Madame Curie. Her tragedies of her legacy being brighter than the life she was forced to live.
But that's not true. Her life could be depressing for our time, but she lived more than you and I ever could. She discovered polonium and radium at the age of 31, founded 2 amazing research institutes, and was married and had 2 kids who she loved. That was a mockery of the life she lived, making it seem as if her endless wars amounted to nothing when she lived her dream life.
But death is the ending. You can't start looking at a life properly until the ripples are no longer there. Look at Vincent van Gogh, for example. His work was only really appreciated when he was dead. And the life he lived was inconsequential in the long run. Yet his legacy will outlive the both of us.
Stop smoking, or you'll be in the next coffin I sell. The pack, too. Go's life, while depressing, he still lived. He had a brother who loved him enough to fund what he thought was a waste of money. Go lived well for a man who lived during a time where mental health wasn't taken as seriously as it should.
Isn't that depressing? In death, he was remembered as a genius, someone cut from a different cloth than us. In life, he did not live life to the fullest. He lived in a time, as you put it, that couldn't truly help him with any of his mental health needs.
But that's not how we measure people. When I die, I want my legacy to be remembered how it was, not the romanticization of my life.
But death is romantic in nature already. Poets write about it, and they make the absolute seem finer than the absolute time we spend on this earth.
There you go again. Art and life can't be expressed the same way. Art tells a story. Human life is the story.
But the story is only told after death. No one spoke of Benedict Arnold before then. Art and death are both told to us in the same way, the same exact viewpoint.
I don't think you're right. I think the only reason why they were told the same way, make sure you understand this is past tense, Fred, is because of how information traveled. Folk stories made Columbus discover that the earth is round, but that's not really how it happened. You know, you can help.
But then what would I pay you for? You know what shocks me? That after all this time, you still haven't learned the importance of death in the memory of others. You've worked here for...
I've worked here for 4 years and 5 months. And yes, I have learned the importance of death in the memory of others. I see mourners more often than you do at this point. What I find shocking is how often you look down on those who are currently living. You'll tell me stories of your aunt as if she were a saint, while also sharing stories of your kids with nowhere near the same reverence. But you view their stories as incomplete because they haven't finished writing it yet. Is that how you view me? Or even yourself? Aren't the living stories as interesting as the dead's?
Chapters can be finished now. But your story, as well as mine, will only be finished with death. And you're all right, though. They are as accomplished as my aunt. But you and I both know that history only remembers the past, not the future, and most certainly not the present.
History rewrites itself all the time. Curie is better remembered now after fights to put her into the cultural zeitgeist. For every one of her, there are hundreds of Chinese Saos. Rather than waiting to remember the dead, we should remember them while they're still alive.
But you're viewing life as if the retrospect can be seen now. Life is meaningless. Death gives it some sort of understanding, at least. And you are right. History is rewritten with new context all the time. Washington owning slaves only to release him on his deathbed because he believed he should be freed will forever tarnish my view on him. See, death asks no questions, right? Death allows us to ignore the messy bits of a human's life and get into the nitty-gritty of their actions.
You would think that someone who is around grievers all the time would understand that death does not make things easier. I can't even count the number of affairs revealed at funerals or second families that showed up. The dead no longer get to speak their truth. We decide what it is and then tell it to future generations until somebody finds out what really happened. Washington was messy, but no human makes sense. To say that death makes things easier to understand is wrong. The ripples never stop.
The ripples never stop.
How often do you talk about your aunt? It's enough to change my perception of her from just another person to the most generous person I know of, and I never even got to meet her.
So am I right? Did you not learn about my romanticized version of her?
No. I learned about the version of her that you keep living. The stories stay consistent, and she's not the only one you built up this way. Your son is the most generous person I've ever met, and the stories you tell live up to that. The stories you tell affect the living, and the stories we tell about you will do the same.
I don't think I'll truly ever understand what you mean. But I do see the merit in your argument. You see, age has given me the wisdom to know that I know far too little about this world to understand legacy. And I think the same can be said for you. The way I see it, you see the glasses more as half full, while I see the glasses half empty. You focus on the living legacy while I focus more on the legacy after death. A minor linguistic phrasing that has left us perpendicular to one another.
You're right. I think our biggest difference will always be in our perception.
Panda Express will wait out the rain.